guys, it's Laura Nicole and welcome to my new show, Turnt for Good. This is the first episode. We are here. Turnt for Good has been a project that's been on my heart for such a long time, but now it's the perfect moment. I feel like all the puzzle pieces have come together for this show and I'm so glad that we are finally here. So on Turnt for Good, we're going to be having guests coming on board and sharing their journeys of pivotal moments in their lives where they've been transformed for the better, where they have changed their way of living, or necessarily just started a change. I believe our job as humans is to to find the light within ourselves and then use that light to shine on others and try help them bring out a darkness, right? So it's really important to just share our stories and to help inspire other people. Yeah, to start this podcast, I thought, how can I bring guests on board and bring them to come and share their stories, but not start off with my own personal journey? So here we are. First episode is going to be my journey, not necessarily anything like right from wrong. It's just the truth, really. It's my story. And yeah, let's dive straight into it. So let me tell you a bit about myself, guys. For those who don't know, my name is Laura Nicole. I am an actress and a media personality. Bit about my life background really is I come from Colombian descent. I'm a British Colombiana. I grew up in a single mother household, 2 brothers. I am the princess. I am the youngest sibling. But yeah, that's a bit of the background story. Just for a bit of context, like I've been someone who, my mum's like a really go-getter type of woman, someone who instilled very big values in my life, who always directed me to go and chase my dreams, chase whatever I wanted, right? So I feel like I've always been a very confident person in myself, always been true to myself with the biggest energy that I have, for most of you that do know, unapologetically me, basically, right? Yeah, so growing up it was really like that. And then about 3 years ago, after obviously as growing up things happen, you go through situations, not necessarily the best. Obviously growing up in a single mother household, it's a broken home already, right? So I had to deal with a lot of cards that necessarily shaped me, and yeah, so basically 3 years ago, this was during COVID. Prior to a bit of COVID and COVID especially, like I started getting a lot of like panic attacks, and I didn't know what panic attacks were, right? I was always someone that, like, I'm in control of any situation you can throw at me, like I just get through it, right? So at that point I thought, okay, COVID is kind of a scary place. Let me do some therapy, right? To me, therapy wasn't ever an option. Like when I used to speak to my mom about like my that I was having like problems mentally and stuff. Not that I had like serious mental health problems growing up, but there's situations that I needed to speak about. She would always be like, "Oh, go to church, pray about it," right? No one in the Latin culture really believed in like therapy and things like that. They used to think that stuff is only for crazy people, right? So yeah, I just decided to do that on my own terms. And yeah, it was really, really helpful for me at that time in my life, because it made me open up and speak about problems that I had never spoken about prior to anyone, or necessarily not been truthful about certain situations and how they made me feel and how they affected me. So yeah, it was really, really, really insightful time for me just to figure out that, yeah, I did suffer with like anxiety, that I did have traumas that happened to me when I was younger that I'd never spoken about or never dealt with, right? So it was a time where all of that stuff came out to light. And I'm just trying to calm it down. Sorry. And yeah, it was good for me to really start my journey of trying to better my mental health, right? So at the time I was actually in a relationship, which then due to the therapy, I was like, okay, I need to take some space out of this. I can't continue this because I need to heal. I need to grow. I need to find myself. I don't know who I am. I haven't ever dealt with these issues. And so, yeah, that happened. And then after that, even when I came out of the relationship, I kind of forgot that I had to do the work to fix yourself. Do you know? Like, okay, the problems are now out to light, but I wasn't dealing with them. I just then went off on a traveling spree. Just as us young people do, just had fun. Honestly, most fun times I've had in my life. Honestly, from 2022 to even now, I've literally traveled to so many different countries, just enjoying life, as you know, drinking, partying, vibes, whatever. Coming 2022 December, I was in Colombia, and I went to Colombia for a long period of time. And honestly, it's one of the best trips of my whole life. I feel like I was so connected. Like, when you're back home, you must have this feeling that you're just so connected to yourself. You see your family. You see, kind of like, for me, it was a big eye opener of wow, like, if I had grown up in Colombia, my life would have been so different. So it was kind of like a space of gratitude, seeing how really blessed I am, but also connecting to myself, to my family, to just, yeah, I was basically connected more to myself, right? And at the end of towards my trip, this was early 2023, January 2023, I set off to a 5-day hike to the Lost City, which is a jungle, Sierra Nevada in Colombia. And no phones, nothing. Like, you connected to nature. There was even indigenous tribes on this trip, right? Like, living in the mountains. We got to witness that. It was such an insightful trip, such an eye opener to really what life was about, right? So I really enjoyed my trip. It was like, I think, the start to building a strong mental foundation, right? It just really taught me a lot on that trip. I was so connected to myself, to my spirit. I remember being like, imagine having 5 days without your phone, no internet, nothing. You don't get that nowadays. That's not a thing in a world that's so fast paced. That is just something that was so beautiful that I honestly want to go back and do again. But anyways, yeah, it was just a really beautiful time for me. I connected also back to God. God's been something that's always been a massive part of my life. I've just never really decided to actually live my life for God, which is a different thing, right? It was just more like, I felt the presence of God from a very young age, but it was something that I said, you know what? I'm going to make the decision as an adult to just follow Christ, right? So I felt like that was a spark to it at the beginning of that trip, because I was just remember praying at night. Like, just imagine yourself in a jungle, right? You're just so connected to nature. So I was so connected to God in those moments. And yeah, I just this was near my end of my trip before I was going to come back to London, right? And I remember just feeling so pumped to like come back home, really get back really get back onto a path to pursuing my dreams, to pursuing my life, my career, to really just, you know, when you just get that oomph to go and do life correctly, right? Instead of just allowing all these distractions, all this partying, this traveling that I've done over the past years to just be a continuous flow, right? So when I got back from the trip, that I remember writing in my journal on the plane back, like, I was ready to literally just come back and it would be game time. Like, everything was I had it all planned out basically for when I come back. To my surprise, I came back to the most horrible, painful experience that I'd ever experienced in my life. So this is obviously the basis of what I want to share with you today, that this was a moment that marked my whole life and shaped me to change, right? And yeah, this without going into detail, this painful experience, it just to put it into a sentence, it literally just ripped my heart, my soul, like, kind of out of Lauda, who Lauda was. I just felt like that wasn't me anymore. That I just lost a part of me that day, right? And I remember, like, the following months from that situation, I kind of felt so confused, because I was like, I came back on such a high, like, ready to take on the world, and then everything that I thought was fulfilling me in that moment didn't matter anymore, because I had to sit with myself, with my emotions, and be in this space that I felt so lonely, right? And yeah, pretty much for like so many months on straight, I was zombie mode. Like I didn't feel like myself. It was like the first time in my life that I felt like I wasn't in control of my emotions, of anything. And it was a really scary space because it was something that was so different to me. I'm a person that's so bubbly, outgoing, and all of that didn't exist during that time. So it was a new space for me, but something that really left a heavy mark on my life, right? And yeah, the months went on, and it's like, when you in life you go through situations and you think life just gets better on the other end. Like I've been someone that's gotten through any bad situation in my life. I'm a guerrera. Like how do you say guerrera in English? I'm a warrior. Like you can throw anything at me type of thing and I'll be good. But in this situation it wasn't that. I was not in control at all. And feeling like this for months and really trying to to be honest, in these times I didn't even have the strength to want to get back up. It was just more like I'm in this space and I'm gonna sit here and I'm just gonna there's no fighting me to get out, right? And yeah, I don't really like using the word depressed, but this was like um a really dark space. So it's coming up to my birthday next week, but this time last year, on my birthday last year, I remember feeling so scared because I was like, well, these emotions are actually really deep and really dark, and I can't keep this to myself. But I didn't really want to get real with my friends. I didn't really want to tell them how much this situation was affecting me. So I remember I sat down my mum on my birthday and I told her that I was scared because I didn't feel like my life had a purpose anymore. I didn't think my life was worth living anymore, that I didn't want to be here anymore. And that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do in my life, because this is someone that's given you life, and to tell her that you think your life is meaningless. It was so difficult, but I felt like it's the only person that I could really tell. Um, and that would I kind of knew that that was my cry out for help, because I know she would then help me get back up on my feet, because I felt like I couldn't do it myself. And then my mum is such a beautiful woman, because I feel like in that moment she reminded me that I was loved, that I had a plan and a purpose for my life. And there's a verse that she's always there's a verse that she's always told me since I was little, that she just reminded me of that day. And it was, before the womb I knew you, before you were born, you were set apart, right? And in that moment it just really uplifted my spirit. So she obviously reminded me of that verse, which she's always told me since I was little, and reminded me of, because unfortunately, obviously, with my dad not being around, I never felt loved. I felt like I was like kind of abandoned. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just something that she always reminded me. You have a plan, you have a purpose. God knows you, God knows your heart. You're handpicked, right? You're here for a reason. And in that moment, it was like just a big hug to me to hear that, right? It wasn't I wouldn't I would say she was trying to remind me in that moment that as much as she can be here for you, like you have to cry out to God. Like he's the only one that can change that bad space that you are in your life, and transform it for good, right? I can't take you out of this. I like She was basically telling me I wish I could change those emotions, but the only person that can change that is God, right? And the craziest thing happened on my birthday, because for the I received flowers on my birthday, right? But that specific birthday where I was feeling that way, I received 15 bouquets of flowers that day. They would just keep coming to my house. Like my grandma was at my house at the time. My mum was there, and she was like, "What's going on? Why you got so many flowers?" And I remember my grandma. We brought her from Colombia for 3 months to stay, right? And she was just so happy, like all sorting out all my flowers. And even her, she didn't know the space that I was in, right? And she was just so happy. And she was like, oh my God, Lara, look, you're so loved. Look at all these flowers, right? And I remember my mum looking at me and she going, God has a beautiful way of showing you that you're loved, Lara. I hope you can see how loved and how valued you are in people's lives. Oh, I'm getting a bit emotional because it's so beautiful. Like, God has a beautiful way of just showing you and telling you things at the perfect moments. And for me, that was it. I was like, you know what? God does actually love me. I am loved. And for all those months that I was in that zombie mode, I felt like that I wasn't worthy of God's love. I was feeling guilty and I was feeling shame for feeling that way. I'm like, that was the last resort that I wanted to go to, because I was like, he's not going to want to love me. He's not going to want anything to do with me, right? So that was just such a beautiful reminder on a day that I felt so dark and so alone that I am loved, right? So I kind of sat on that thought for a couple weeks and didn't really do anything about it apart from like go to church. And I would just sit at church and I feel like the word was really speaking to me, but I was still feeling unworthy of his love, right? Which is such a crazy thing to feel now that I'm looking back at it. But I honestly felt like God doesn't want anything to do with me. Like he doesn't love me, right? And then I would go back home and sit back with these emotions that we're feeling. And then one day I think I was just at the end of it. I was like, I can't feel like this no more. And I dropped to my knees and I cried out to God and I said, God, I remember it so clearly. I was like, God, I am so scared. I was like, I don't feel like I'm in control anymore. Um, I don't think I'm in control anymore. Like, I've fought my whole life. I don't have any fight in me anymore. So can you please come and fight for me? And it's so beautiful because although that was a proper cry out for help, that cry out for help was actually an invitation to God to come into my life. And that's one thing I've learned, that God is a gentleman. He doesn't barge or force himself into your life. Like, you have to invite and welcome him and allow him to come into your life and then move in your life. So he was patiently waiting at my doorstep for so many months, waiting for me to let him in. And that cry out for help, that surrender where I was like, I have no fight. Can you please fight for me? He came and he really just then, that was like the invitation for him to come in my life. And then from that day, I remember, like, you still have to deal with what you're going through. You still have the emotions, but I had some sort of knowing that everything was going to be okay from that moment. I started to read my word more. I started getting more involved in church. So yeah, obviously after that encounter, um, I still felt the way I was feeling, but I just had a small understanding in my heart that everything was going to be okay, right? Um, the only issue with that season of my life, I was battling between two things. Like, okay, having this encounter with God, feeling his presence and knowing he's here for me, and that I want to that I want to start walking with him, but then at the same time still latching on to my way of living and my past and what I thought living was, right, what I thought was fulfilling me. So that being said, was parties, drinking, not necessarily because I had given up alcohol from February. I messed up a few times, but it was more like trying to numb the pain with like getting high, right? I would get high to try to distract myself. I would go to parties, try to distract myself, but then I was, if anything, feeling worse in those situations. No, but if anything, I was feeling just more sad and more in that loneliness in those situations. So that's when I started realizing, like, I can't do one and I can't do the other. And I was so confused. And I remember praying to God. I was like, God, if I felt you in my heart and you're in my heart, then why am I still feeling like this? Why am I still in this space of not knowing, in this space of confusion, and in this space of battling which way of my life to live, right? And I I just remember I just remember feeling that I had to make a choice. I had to either choose to ignore my deep rooted issues, and so that's when I had to make a choice of keep indulging in worldly desires, right, worldly activities, or choose God. And I was in that space for a while. I slowly started letting go of, like I said, like I had already let go of the alcohol. That wasn't a problem. But I was still trying to get high to numb pains. I was still trying to go to parties so I didn't have to sit at home and think about myself, right? Think about how I was feeling about the situation. Try just completely distract myself. So it was about, we've all been in this space, right, where we don't feel like we need to choose one. We can just dip our toe in here and dip our toe in there, because I was still feeling God's presence on the Sunday at church. But then on the Saturday, I was out in parties. I was getting high on the weekend, weekday even. Like, so to me, I was like, okay, I can have both worlds, right? But that's when I realized I was not getting better. It was just more like putting a band-aid on it and walking with a band-aid on, rather than dealing with what's actually inside, right? So as I was stuck in the two, I remember going to church on a Sunday, and it was basically speaking about obedience. Like, you can live your life the way you want to live it. We have free of will. God's given us the will to have freedom to do whatever we want. It's your choice. So it's like the choice for you to miss that train and miss that plan and purpose that God has prepared and has for your life, or you continue doing it your way, right? And to me, at the time, for those that don't know, I still was doing my events called Salvaje. I had a nightclub event on that was doing really well. It was really successful, was selling out each time, was making great money off it. And it was something that I wanted to hold on to. I was like, God, yeah, I really love you. I know you want to move in my life, but I want to hold on to this because it's my bread and butter, right? And I just remember feeling it so clear, like, you can't have both. If you want to surrender to me, you have to surrender to me fully. And that was a massive test. And I thank God every day I made the decision to let go of that business that I had, because it's you don't take that decision lightly. But as soon as I stopped wrestling with God and I let go of that and I made the decision to let go of it, I felt so much peace in my heart. That was peace that there's no understanding to it. It was just such a a relief that I felt, yeah, I did the right thing. So that was the first moment that I was like, okay, I'll let go of that. And then from that space, I think that really helped my faith grow. In that moment, I was like, oh wow, like I genuinely do want to give my life to God, because I've just let go of something that most people would not let go of. That's making thousands of money in one night. That's having a successful business. That's something that you can just work on your own accord, that you're not nobody's your boss, you are your own boss. So it was something that I was just so proud of, making myself that decision. To me, it was a physical thing as proof of my faith to God. So it only helped me grow in my faith and say, yeah, you know what? I do actually trust God, because letting go of something is what we as humans struggle with. But to do that so clearly just helped me just move in this space, right? And I remember still kind of struggling with other areas of my life, which were the going out, the getting high part. And I remember at one point I just decided to just let go. Like, I need to let go of this. I'm taking 5 steps forward and taking another step back. Like, I just want to move forward. I don't want anything that you don't want, God. I want your plan, your purpose for my life, not my own way. I can't do it in my own strength. I've tried to do it in my own strength my whole life. It hasn't worked out for me. Yeah, great. I've been doing well. I've been doing good stuff. I've been having fun, but nothing is fulfilling me. Nothing is making me feel like I have a purpose in this life. So you know what, God, I lay everything at your feet. You have your way with me, right? And that's when I made a decision to get baptized. The baptism was just something that landed in my heart, that I was like, you know what, this has been such a transformative period of my life, where I've changed everything. I've given up so many things. I've sacrificed so many things for you, God. Like, I want it to be marked. I want this moment to be marked, to say no to alcohols, to say no to drugs, to say no to having sex, like to be abstinent. Like, that was all a decision that I had in my baptism. It was like a clear marked moment for me to sacrifice my life and give it to God, right? I want to be cleansed. I want to be pure. I want to be a new creation. And my baptism was such a beautiful day, because I felt it so clearly in my spirit. I was so moved by God that day that it was, to me, it just built my faith and my foundation for the next steps. Now, obviously, now we are in the next few months after my baptism, and I can say confidently now my desires have changed. It's not such a struggle for me now. It's more like, I understand what I've decided for my life. I want God's plan, not my plan. And that was just such a physical thing to be proof of my faith. So yeah, that day for me, the baptism day, was just such a clear moment of surrender to God and saying, let your will be done, right? I give my life to you. I'm going to live my life for you, and this is a public declaration of my faith. And what's crazy is that day I was so full of the presence of God, right? And I was just like, yeah, it's my time now. Like, I'm gonna boom off. And then again, God reminded me of the word, like, total forgiveness, and really made me sit with myself, because I was getting a lot of spiritual attacks after my baptism, and he really made me sit with myself and realize that, firstly, I hadn't fully forgiven myself for certain situations. I hadn't forgiven certain people that had hurt me, and that that a root of a lot of my issues was the lack of forgiveness I had to my father, right? For not being in my life. Um and I was like, God, but why? You know, when you're like, why, God? Like, I've just done all of this, and then you want to bring another thing. But this is something about God, like, he will make sure you are built with all the new foundations in your life. He won't miss a thing. He'll make you deal with everything you have to deal with in order to then walk as this new creation, right? And yeah, I just went back and forth with myself. I was like, okay, cool. How do you forgive myself? How do you forgive myself completely, right? Okay, get real with yourself. Why do you need to forgive yourself? What do you blame yourself for? What overpowers your thoughts all the time? Like, what are these situations that are constantly in your mind that you feel like you need to forgive yourself on, right? So I sat down and I was like, went through my list of my long list of things, and really prayed and said, God, you know what? Forgive myself for this, forgive yourself. I want to let go of this. Blah 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 blah. Right? Anyone who's hurt me, yeah, I forgive this person. I forgive this person. I forgive this person. I forgive this person. But my dad, I'm not ready to let go of that one yet, right? And as a lot of children might believe too, this might be something that I have to touch on a whole nother episode, because it's such a long story. But it's something that God actually made me deal with face to face, and I'm so glad I did, because how can you choose to live for God? How can you choose to walk, to love like Christ did, but you haven't forgiven, right? And whether that is yourself or someone else or your father or whoever it is, I really understood that in that moment. And I was like, in order to be this new person and live for God and to love like God did, because that's what like Christ did, that was what I knew I wanted to do. I have to forgive and I have to let go. So I dealt with that last month, dealt with a lot of stuff last month, and really just completely let go of past situations, prayed a prayer to forgive myself, to forgive those who hurt me, to forgive my father, and I felt such weight off my shoulder. I felt like I was free, and that was the last thing that God wanted me to learn and to really take charge of before then coming out the other side, right? Seeing the light out of the other tunnel. And after I look back at all this, at all the pain, all the suffering, all the transformative period, all the good and the bad, I'm just so glad that God can turn any bad situation out for good, right? In a space where I thought there was no way out, like God really met me where I was. And that's what's beautiful. And what I've realized for anyone who's listening to this, like, you don't have to put yourself back up. You don't need to put yourself back up to then have an encounter with God or come back to God. He will actually meet you wherever you are as long as you invite him to. And that's what's beautiful. No matter how dark you think you are, no matter what pit you think yourself in, God will climb in that pit and drag you out if you ask him to, but only if you ask him to. So that's just an encouragement to anyone listening to this. This isn't like completely detailed part of my story, but it's just so you can see the transformation from this dark space to now being in this ray of light, I call it, right? Having this peace in my heart that makes no sense. It doesn't mean that my life is perfect right now. It just means that I have a clarity in what I believe in, what I want to live for, but then the peace in my heart that makes no sense. You can throw anything at me and I feel confident that I will sit with peace in my heart, because that's the gift that I've been given by God, right? This peace that surpasses all understanding, like it says in his word. I just share my story as an encouragement for anyone that might be in the same space as I was, or that might be in a confused season in their life, a season where they have no understanding. I just want everyone to know that there is a way out. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is still a fight in you. So yeah, guys, that is my story, and I share it so you guys can feel encouraged and so you can feel that you're not alone in this space, that there is a way out of any dark situation, that any bad situation can be turned for good, and it can be a testimony for others. Because I really believe that in this world, we're not here for ourselves, we're here for others, to encourage others, to inspire others, and to get people out of that space that you might were once in. So with that being said, there is this verse that really touched my heart and I want to share with you guys, which is in Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. Each of you have a purpose and a plan in this life, but if only you allow God to move through your life and for that plan to come to life. So stay tuned for all the future episodes where we're going to have other guests on, also sharing their stories, always also encouraging you guys. It's not just going to be serious. We are going to get fun. We are going to get some juicy topics. So make sure you guys stay tuned. Follow us on all platforms, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, all of that. Make sure you subscribe so you do not miss an episode. So bye, guys.